and now we can start talking about the real business, that is how to start invest, how to start. So we should focus now on what Mr. Vojta Žižka will say. He is the founder of the YouTube channel on investment, and he will tell us something about what the initial steps should be and what should the steps to follow be. So the floor is yours. Hi, Vojta Žižka. I've come to tell you something about how to start investments. A warning to start with, whatever I say is my personal opinion. It is not an opinion of my employer, nor is it an investment recommendation. It is just a reflection about how to delve in the world of finance. This is really the basis. So, just to make you laugh, recently there was an interview, and it is titled, I have a couple of mortgages, but my roof is leaking. So if you want to sort out this, just think about what I'm going to say. So who am I? I've been investing since 13 years. Actually, I became a fan of share markets when I was 17. My first shares were of Apple. Now I am a boss of investment bankers, and our portfolio has about 13 billion crowns worth. So this, and what is my biggest hobby is my YouTube channel. It's called like myself, Vojta Žižka, and you can just listen to the interviews that I have with people who are well placed to speak about all this. So let us now speak about how to start. Well, Warren Buffett explains a very easy, has a very easy way to explain things, and I think that giving you very expert formulae is not really very useful. Let us use examples. Investing is like sports. If you start sports, you can't start with a marathon race, and you certainly won't earn money by running the marathon race. But if you invest, if you do some jogging, you just reap other benefits. You become fit, you prolong, you extend your lifespan and all that. Before we start jogging, before we start playing tennis, we need to have some equipment. In terms of investing, the equipment is money. How to get the money? People tend to say, I'd like to invest, but I have no money. Well, to start with, I'll give you an idea. Would you rather have coffee in Starbucks or would you buy your coffee maker? Or would you rather buy a house? I think that most people, most reasonably young people, will rather buy a house or invest in a house. There is this number 752. This is a rule which I applied to most of my examples. What are the rules that I think about? This is the easiest, the simplest slide of my presentation, which explains the 752 rules. Let us consider that every week you spend 1,000 crowns for useless things like cigarettes, coffee, which is excessively expensive. If you spend just 500 and you multiply it by the years, by every working day, you will end up with the figures 376,000. So that is the money which you would have. And if you send this to an average share fund, security fund, and if you do it really regularly, it will generate an interesting sum. So the first decision to take is I won't spend money on excessively expensive Starbucks coffee, because this will generate some capital. And I started doing that when I was 17. If I did it with the coffee, then I would have money to buy a flat. So the main lesson when you think about finance is to think in the long run. How much can it earn, not in 1 month, but in 1 year, 10 years, and so on. So this is the basic idea. Think in long terms. How will my life look if I behave the way I do now? Let us assume that you have some free money. And you have two possibilities. The first of them is that you will ask a professional, you will address a consultant, or you will do the so-called DIRE. It is not RIRE, it is not Dior with I, not with Y, it is do your own decision or resolution. The problem of finance consultancy in Czechia, and indeed globally, is that you pay for the product. The financial consultancy is free, in inverted commas. You don't pay anything for opening an account or investing in a fund, but you pay for the product, which is not properly set, and I hope that it will change in the future. In financial consultancy, as I hope, what should be paid for is the time of the expert, who will spend the time with me and who will cherry-pick the best products which will be the best suited to me. But we are not that far. You are young people, you've just finished your school, and you want to do your own research. R is for research. So if you want to Google it, what can you find? There are videos, there are interviews, there are articles. They claim that the financial system is in collapse. You should buy gold, you should buy Tesla shares or some immovables. Others will say invest in Nasdaq or in Apple shares. But this is a mess. And if you don't understand finance, you can't find your way out of it. These are just outcries, like in the exchange where people are crying, doing their quotes. But still there are many young investors who do the same. And that's not correct. The history shows, and the theory of likelihood shows it as well, that your investment portfolio, your investment story, if it is composed in this way, it won't end up well. All you will have is red eyes full of tears. The second idea, which is important, besides the one of the long-term considerations, is that you will not listen to or abide by those outcries, by those encouragement, one-time offers, and so on. Write a story. And I'll give you a metaphor to understand what the story means. If I want to go from Prague to Brno, I only need it one time. I want to get there as quickly as possible. I can take a great car, which will drive at 250, or a train. No, I'm speaking about a car, and there is a driver who is just crazy, and we will get there very quickly, less than 1 hour. But if I continue to do that over 10 years, there is a huge likelihood that he will kill me one day. So although it looks, if you do it just one time, as a great idea to be as fast as that, but you certainly want to live longer than just 10 years. So it is important to write the story, to think in the long-term perspective again. What is the story? It is very dull. It sounds dull. Diversified investment portfolio. Now, the question is whether you know really what it is. But let's have a closer look at it, because this is the most substantial part of my presentation. This is the way how to protect your money, how to increase it. Probably it won't be some spectacular, miraculous enrichment, because there are other types of investments, but this is fairly reliable. So the investment portfolio, you can see that is the beginning of the proverb, don't put all your eggs in one basket. This means diversify your risks. That's how the portfolio works. Not everything should be put in ETF or in immovables or in shares. This is the cake diagram where you can see the individual types of investments. And the time which have been allotted to give you the presentation on investments is not sufficient to explain you all the types of assets, what should be their representation, what should be their share. But you will find out in my YouTube channel. And I will tell you about how I proceeded in my investment. But you can have your own way how you can do things. This is a kind of a springboard to give you the start. The investment portfolio should reflect your approach to risk, to your financial. It must be adjusted to your possibilities. There is no universal advice. If there is a 60-year-old guy who will come up to me and he will want to invest, and his intention is then to spend all the money on a trip around the globe, then he will proceed in a different way than a guy who is aged 20. This is a typical example. All these investments which you can see, the Bitcoin, gold, shares, I do use them, but the proportions, the rates are different. These are just the building blocks which I want to impart on you. Immovables is one of these building blocks. I skipped the high inflation rate. I skip now the interest rates environment which exists now, because we are speaking theoretically about how to invest. And if you're serious when considering it, if one day you want to become independent as to the finance, then you should have some immovables. There is one special charm which is associated with immovables, which I learned very soon. You can use capital which is not yours, which is mortgage. If you have 3 million crowns, which is not a typical case of the people who are age 20 now, you can always, if you have the shares index, then it will earn, let's say, 9–10%. If you buy a flat, well, in Prague you won't buy a big flat, but you can buy something smaller. But it will carry some profit. But what I can do is the so-called leverage effect. If I take a mortgage, time is working for me. Time is your pal. Because if I have 1 million crowns on my account, in 10 years, I will still have my million on the account. The figure still will be there, but the value will not be the same. But the same applies to debt. If I take a mortgage of 2–3 million crowns, then the debt, the value of the debt will decrease, even if the price of the immovables of a property does not increase in value. If you take the debt, it is the debt that will decrease, and you can use the capital of somebody else. If when I'm 20, I decide to buy an investment flat, it can help you greatly. Time is your pal, and if you use the strange capital or the capital of somebody else, then there is very good valuation. And in Czechia, so it multiplies the worth of the immovables.
You will have to think of reconstruction and work with the clients or the customers, but you can learn it. It's no rocket science. And property certainly has its place in investment capital. I recorded this video with Ivana Hirtova, who had debts when she was 30. Now, 10 years later, she owns a good bit of capital. That's one building block that should be considered. Property. ETF is another topic. You probably all know Radovan Vavra. Whatever podcast he visited most of them, including mine, and he says that investing into ETF, you are buying the 500 biggest companies, and you certainly will not get burned. It would be naive to think if I put into S&P, I put all my money, it will bring 10% every year. It is not clear of inflation in some years. The yield can even be negative. I warn here, if you do not time, if you do not wait for the rate to go up or down, dollar cost averaging or regular investment, we can say in Czech, that brings the same effect as 752, 4,000 crowns per month, and that will bring me the effect I spoke of. Another big advantage of ETFs is that you will not beat the index on the long run. You can read about it. ETF typically beats most of actively managed funds. And you do not have to care for anything. If any of the 500 companies does badly, it will be replaced. So you don't have to look through their payments or the balances. If you start such an investment for your newly born baby, it will serve him or her within 20 years from now. ETFs are such a differentiated group that you can be buying gold, but I am rather speaking of ETFs in shares, especially US shares. Another one that fits into the jigsaw puzzle is Bitcoin. Bitcoin is so much discussed and few people read of it. When I first started investing, when I was 17, I said, okay, it's such a risk hedge that will protect me if anything happens to the financial system. That's why I mention it in my basic portfolio. It's not a recommendation. It's such a wild card, as I call it. There are people who are well versed in bitcoins, but I present this to people who do not invest yet or are only planning for it. Bitcoin is such a digital gold, so to say. It divorces money from the state, and the latest events convinced me that it's worth having it in your portfolio. Mr. Strokal will be speaking here. He said that he regrets that though Bitcoin is known since 2008, it should be a part of your portfolio. I do not believe it's highly speculative. It's a small accessory that should be added, and only money that can be in fact lost should be put on it. But if we were in a pub, then over a glass of beer I will say, put your money into property ETF and a small chunk of bitcoins. That probably should be the way to take. And what about the rest of things? If you go to YouTube, there will be a number of videos of stock picking, for example. It depends very much on insiders. Everyone wants to buy shares of Tesla. But stock picking from the long-term point of view will earn you less than if you put your money into property and ETF. I would rather think of 3 ETFs and invest into them on a long basis. If you talk to a trader, you will find out how many people were not successful in trading during the last 3 or 6 months. That's the absolute majority, 80 or 90%, and in the long run it will be over 90%. It's a bad idea for most people. I also mentioned it in my diversified portfolio. I had it there. I have the funny little things there. There should be some cash, and part of the portfolio is a speculative one. You don't have to have it necessarily, but if you put some money into it, don't consider it to be a serious type of investing. There is a big problem to overcome the indexes. I mentioned altcoin coins or forex. The 3 things that I showed you are functioning for a long time. These things should be taken as small, funny things, not a really solid part of the portfolio. Things that I would like to leave with you is think long term. Don't think of what will happen within 6 months or a year, but what will happen in 10 years' time, or ideally in 20 years' time. You should think long term, and that's what most successful people do. They don't plan for the week to come, but for decades to come. And please ignore the shouts or cry-outs that you'll hear. People who will tell you, buy property, buy shares. They do not bear the responsibility. It's your money. And if you lose money, it's your loss, not of the person that gave you the instruction. And education should be long-term. Investing, once again, I do the sports comparison. You should not do sport 1 time a year, but every week. A small advertising for my YouTube channel. It can help education. If you become my fan or visitor from time to time, you will be able to get more financial knowledge. And to give you an example, how to move in investment. One of the ways to get education, podcast is not the ideal thing, but it's books. And certainly everyone will tell you that. And there are 3 books you should read after hearing this presentation. They can change your life for the better and support what I was saying. Dominic Stroker wrote Bitcoin and other types of money. It's a great book. I think it's audio too nowadays. The absolute top. What that changes the way of thinking is the almanac that can be downloaded from a website. You don't have to pay for it. I have it in a printed form, and every page of it is worth reading maybe 10 times. I learned nearly everything that I am now applying. It's a book. If you take one thing out of this, is you please read this book, and another is a little book of common sense in investing. It will give you advice how to behave on the market, why you should know about the Vanguard, one of the biggest asset managers in the earth, and the book will show you that there are ways to avoid bad paths. So I will leave you with those titles of 3 excellent books. Now let's move on to your questions. Thank you. And we have a number of questions. First one, I will read it out. Hello, Vojta. What economists or investors you would recommend from your point of view? Where do you get your information from? As for internet sources, look at my Twitter, whom I follow. I follow interesting persons. You can really find people in this country or in the world who present themselves that they understand investment very well. Please don't be led by the fact that the person is well known or popular. Can only be funny what he says. Naval is really an authority which I listen to. And in the Czech Republic, Dominic Stroker is my favorite person. He will speak here today. How do you find out that the person is good? Well, in investor, it's very easy. It is a portfolio manager who speaks in the media, and I compare his effectiveness with the ETF 500. It tells me that there's no use in continuing listening to him. If at present Jagr, a hockey player, will speak of investment on the TV, well, I think that he has a capacity in ice hockey, not in investment. And I should rather listen to authority, there may be a well-known economist, but may not be expert in crypto. So you can recommend ETF. Well, I said at the beginning, I am not giving you recommendation. But again, if I were to advise, should be ETF 500, I'll tell you what I do. Cheap but good quality broker should be used, and you buy ETF aimed at world's shares. You will not lose your money on that. Somebody who is named Johnny Toshi. Should interest rate should be considered? Can a bank increase the interest rate within some years? Yes, people who got some cheap mortgages some time ago, the bank guarantees the interest rate, but if when that period is over, you have to negotiate for a new one. Another question popped up. Hello, Vojta. How would you play the game? Whether it concerns living in a flat, would you pay a rent, or would you invest into your own apartment? Well, I have several mortgages and I pay a rent for the place I live. That was what I mentioned for my roof leaking when I have several mortgages. I would consider this to fulfill one's need. We want to live our life to feel well. Sometime from now I will live in my own property. But if I decide I would buy an investment apartment elsewhere than in Prague and live on rent in Prague. Bitcoin, ETF, there are first such examples in the US. ETF on crypto, probably through a bank or a broker, you can achieve a cheap action. And I hope that this will go through. I am for or in favor of the crypto world being brought together with the classical one. How can you at present recommend property on leverage? Isn't that forbidden? Well, I am not making recommendations. I repeat, I just speak of what I did myself some time ago. On leverage, it means that I use other people's capital. You get a mortgage, you buy your own property, and you use leverage. But once again, I am not making a general recommendation. I'm speaking of myself. It's not a rule that could be applied to all the people listening. Okay, we are running out of time. So, certainly Vojta can answer your questions on his channel. At present, I thank him for the excellent speech that could motivate people to invest. Thank you for having invited me, and have a good time.